Somewhere above the 78th parallel, a small Norwegian town is operating under a legal framework that exists nowhere else on Earth. You cannot be born here. You cannot die here. If a woman goes into labor, she is flown out. If a resident receives a terminal diagnosis, they are removed. The town has no maternity ward and no capacity for end-of-life care because both were ruled unnecessary for a place that was never meant to be permanent. The cemetery stopped accepting new burials in 1950. The ground is frozen solid, and the dead do not decompose. They stay exactly as they are, perfectly preserved, perfectly present, in the permafrost beneath the hill. The last person buried here died decades ago. They are still there, unchanged. It is also illegal to leave this town without a firearm. Not a recommendation, not a guideline, a legal requirement. This is Longyearbyen, population 2,500, the northernmost permanent settlement in the world. And there are places on this earth far more extreme than this. This film goes to 4 of them. Stay until the end, because the final location in this film is not a town. It is a military outpost at 82 degrees north, 817 kilometers from the North Pole, staffed year-round by a crew of 5 people. What they do there, and what the darkness costs them, will completely change how you understand the outer edge of where human beings can go. Longyearbyen, Svalbard, Norway. The Svalbard archipelago sits in the Arctic Ocean, midway between the northern coast of Norway and the geographic North Pole. It is not a remote corner of Norway. It is a separate legal territory, governed by the Svalbard Treaty of 1920, where 66 nations have the right to settle and operate. John Munro Longyear arrived in 1906. He was an American businessman. He saw coal in the mountains, established a mining company, and built the settlement that would carry his name. Workers came. Structures went up. A permanent community formed around an extraction operation at the top of the world. What no one fully calculated was what happens when a permanent community is built at 78 degrees north. For 110 days every year, the sun does not rise over Longyearbyen. Not twilight, not reduced daylight. Total darkness, unbroken, complete, from late October to mid-February. And buried in the mountain above the town, 150 meters inside frozen rock, is the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. 1.3 million seed samples from every food crop grown on Earth, sealed in a tunnel carved into permafrost, located here, in this specific mountain, above this specific town, because of the darkness and the cold and the certainty that nothing reaches this place by accident. The thinking was precise. If civilization fractures, the last place anything would be deliberately targeted is here. They built the backup copy of Earth's food supply inside the coldest, darkest, most inaccessible town in Europe. But here is what changes everything about Longyearbyen: the bears. There are approximately 3,000 polar bears in the Svalbard archipelago. There are 2,500 people in Longyearbyen. The bears outnumber the residents. Every person who leaves the town limits must carry a firearm capable of stopping a bear at close range. Not a recommended practice, a legal requirement. Children carry rifles to school. Scientists carry loaded weapons into the field. Hikers, researchers, maintenance workers. Everyone who crosses the town boundary carries the means to defend themselves against an apex predator that treats this landscape as its own. And yet, people move here voluntarily. They raise children here. They build careers here. Some have never lived anywhere else. What Longyearbyen makes clear is not that humans are reckless. It is that humans are adaptable in ways that do not show up in any survival calculation. The darkness becomes routine. The bears become a condition, like weather. The rules that exist nowhere else on Earth become simply the rules. Longyearbyen is therefore not a settlement at the edge of the world. It is evidence that when people decide a place is worth living in, they will redesign civilization to make it work. Oymyakon, Sakha Republic, Siberia, Russia. The name means non-freezing water. There is a thermal spring here, a vent in the earth producing water warm enough to drink even when the air outside is minus 50 degrees Celsius. This is why people settled in this valley, not despite the cold, because of the water. Oymyakon is the coldest permanently inhabited place on Earth. In January of 1933, a Soviet meteorologist named Sergei Obruchev recorded a temperature of minus 67.7 degrees Celsius. That is minus 89.9 degrees Fahrenheit. At that temperature, exposed skin begins to freeze in under 60 seconds. Saliva crystallizes before it reaches the ground. Metal conducts cold so efficiently that touching it without protection causes immediate tissue damage. The population is approximately 500 people. They have lived here, in this valley, continuously, through temperatures that have never been recorded at any other inhabited place on the planet. Here is what daily life requires in Oymyakon. Cars are never turned off. If an engine is shut down in deep winter, it will not start again until spring. Vehicles idle continuously, in driveways, in parking areas, because stopping means losing them. Heating an engine block with an open flame is the alternative. Residents do this routinely. Glasses freeze to faces. Metal conducts the cold directly to the skin, and in minus 50 conditions, this causes injury. Residents wear no metal in winter. Eyelashes freeze together. Breath crystallizes in open air, producing a faint crackling sound. In the Yakut language, the indigenous language of this region, there is a specific word for the sound frozen breath makes when it hits cold air. It exists in no other language on Earth, because no other language needed it. When someone dies in Oymyakon in winter, burying them requires 3 days of preparation. Fires are lit over the burial site and kept burning for 24 hours to thaw the permafrost enough to break the surface. The process repeats the following day and the day after. This is not exceptional. This is the standard procedure for burial. The Yakut people have lived in this river valley for over 1,000 years. They did not arrive here by accident. They came following reindeer herds across Siberia, and they stayed because the spring did not freeze, because the rivers held fish through winter, and because the land, despite every condition it imposed, provided enough. This is not the story most people expect about a place with a record low of minus 67. The most significant thing about Oymyakon is not the temperature, not the logistics of surviving conditions that crack steel and defeat combustion engines. It is this. The people who live here call it home, not a hardship posting, not an inherited obligation. Home. The place they are from, the place they return to. Ittoqqortoormiit, East Greenland. Twice a year, a supply ship arrives. That single sentence contains almost everything you need to understand about Ittoqqortoormiit. On the northeastern coast of Greenland, 800 kilometers above the Arctic Circle, a community of 450 people maintains one of the most isolated permanent settlements on Earth. The nearest town is Tasiilaq, on the opposite coast of the island. In winter, the journey takes 4 to 5 days by dog sled across pack ice that may or may not hold. In summer, the sea opens, and the overland route ceases to exist. There is no road connecting this community to anywhere else. There has never been a road. There will never be a road. The name means, in Greenlandic, the people who live in big houses. The houses are not big. The name refers to the turf and stone longhouses their ancestors built. Structures designed not for comfort, but for collective survival. Multiple families sharing body heat through a winter that ran for 5 months in a single enclosed space, against cold that had no mercy for anyone who ran out of fuel. The community hunts to survive. Narwhal, polar bear, musk ox, Arctic fox, ringed seal. These are not traditional practices maintained for cultural memory. They are the food supply. When the supply ship is delayed, and it has been delayed, there is no secondary option. The hunt is what keeps people alive. In the autumn of 2020, storms prevented the supply ship from reaching Ittoqqortoormiit for 6 weeks past its scheduled arrival. 450 people were dependent on what they had stored, what they could catch, and what the land offered. The ship arrived, but the 6 weeks before it did were not theoretical. This wasn't inconvenience. This was survival. There is a concept in Arctic communities for the relationship between a settlement and its environment. The closest English translation is something between to be known by a place and to be responsible for it. Not ownership, not mastery, reciprocity. Ittoqqortoormiit has been continuously inhabited for 4,500 years. The supply ship has been coming for 60. The people were here for 4,440 years before the ship arrived. Utqiaġvik, Alaska, USA. For 65 consecutive days every year, the sun does not rise over this town. Not 65 mornings of reduced light. Not 65 days of short days. From the 19th of November to the 23rd of January, the horizon does not change. The sky does not brighten. Darkness, unbroken and total, for 65 days in sequence. Utqiaġvik sits at the northern tip of Alaska, on a narrow spit of land where the Chukchi Sea and the Beaufort Sea converge. It is the northernmost city in the United States. Population, approximately 5,000. The Inupiat people have lived here for at least 1,500 years. They did not arrive here looking for shelter. They arrived following the bowhead whale. The bowhead is one of the largest animals on the planet, capable of living 200 years. It migrates through the waters off Utqiaġvik twice annually, spring and fall. The Inupiat built their civilization around these migrations, their calendar, their social structure, their technology, their entire framework for understanding the world, organized around the whale. A successful bowhead hunt is not a private achievement. The whale is shared with the entire community. Every family receives a portion. The captain of the whaling crew bears the full cost of preparation and celebration. The feast that follows is not optional. It is the mechanism by which the community distributes protein for the year. not generosity in the abstract. Here is what makes Utqiaġvik most significant. In the 65 days of polar night, the Inupiat do not stop. They hunt under the stars. They travel across sea ice by sound and by memory. They navigate in darkness that would disorient anyone trained to read visible landmarks. This is not bravery. It is knowledge. Has anything in your own life outlasted what was supposed to stop it? Because this community was built by people with no engineering department, no supply chain, and no margin for failure. And what they built has outlasted every empire that has risen and fallen in the same time period. Tell us in the comments what you think that means. Alert. Ellesmere Island, Nunavut, Canada. 817 kilometers from the North Pole. At this moment, 5 people are there. Alert is the northernmost permanently staffed location on Earth. It sits on the northeastern tip of Ellesmere Island at 82 degrees 30 minutes north latitude. The nearest settlement of any kind is Resolute Bay, 1,200 kilometers to the south. The nearest city is so far away it is effectively theoretical. Alert was established in 1950 as a weather station. During the Cold War, it became a signals intelligence outpost, positioned at the point on Earth where the shortest flight path between the Soviet Union and North America passes directly overhead. The Arctic, at the height of the Cold War, was not remote. It was central. Alert was built to listen. The 5 people stationed at Alert at any given time rotate in on 4 to 6 month postings. Canadian Forces personnel, signals specialists, meteorologists, support staff. No permanent civilian population. No children, no families in residence. A runway, buildings, and the cold. The average January temperature is minus 33 degrees Celsius. The record low is minus 52.9. For 142 days per year, the sun does not breach the horizon. There is a tradition at Alert that began in the 1950s and has not stopped. Every rotation of personnel arriving at this outpost above the world leaves a marker, a plaque, a carved name, a flag, to record that someone was here. Not for history, not for institutional record-keeping. Because in a place this far from everything, the act of being present requires acknowledgement. Here is what Alert makes clear that none of the other places in this film make in quite the same way. Alert is not a place people live because the land provides. There is no whale to hunt, no hot spring, no coal, no fish beneath the ice. Alert provides nothing except its position on the planet. It exists because human beings decided that knowing what happens at 82 degrees north, the weather, the signals, the magnetic fluctuations, the darkness, was worth sending people to find out. Not because it was survivable, not because it was practical, because it mattered. Every piece of Arctic science, every polar expedition, every early warning dataset from the high north traces back, in some form, to people who went to the end of the Earth to measure it, and kept going back. There are 8 billion people on this planet. Almost all of them live between the 40th parallel south and the 60th parallel north, in a narrow band of latitude where the temperature is survivable, without calculation, without preparation, without a community that understands exactly what winter means. The people in this film live outside that band, by inheritance, by choice, by assignment. What they share, what Longyearbyen and Oymyakon and Ittoqqortoormiit and Utqiaġvik and Alert all share, is not toughness. That word is insufficient. What they share is this. They decided the place was worth the cost. Every year, every winter. Every time the darkness returned, the temperature dropped below the point where ordinary logic stops working. Worth it. Cold does not stop people. It never has. Which of these 5 places do you think demands the most from the people who call it home? The most isolated, the coldest, the darkest? Tell us in the comments, because we want to know what you think. Until the next video.